Welcome to the Business Leader Spotlight. The Business Leader Spotlight is bringing attention to those in our community making a difference in business. It is also an opportunity to identify the skills they have learned and applied to get where they are. And now, let us go into this week's interview.
Thank you for joining me today on the Business Leader Spotlight. We have our special guest with us, Jason Todd. Welcome to the show, Jason. How are you today?
I am doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. If you don't mind, Jason, sharing a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, absolutely. In a nutshell, I am a multiple-time entrepreneur. I've started, run, and sold companies, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And most recently, I've had the opportunity to work on some really, I think, innovative and interesting consulting opportunities with some companies, and that's kept me busy. But I also, during COVID, launched a project called Coffee with Humans, which is just I call it my sacred space to connect, share, and make the world a better place. So that's the other thing I'm working on.
Okay, so it's so with your show Coffee with Humans, it started because you saw something possibly missing in the market. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you were thinking when you put the idea together?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in business, and I'm on LinkedIn, and this is where I focused it. I'm on LinkedIn for business, to make connections. But ultimately, I think that fundamentally, I guess that's just how I should say it. Fundamentally, businesses are just made of people who happen to agree to similar goals, and so under the surface of all the business stuff that we work on and how we connect and the lives that we live, we're just people. We're just humans, and we have similar struggles. We have similar needs. We have similar concerns. We have similar fears. We have similar hopes, and because of that, we are linked together across the world, across economies. And so what I was seeing in the market, let's say, was this idea of disconnection. I started it in April. This idea of lockdown during COVID was totally new. People are struggling. And it seemed that disconnection was turning to hopelessness. And I decided I'm not going to participate in hopelessness. Instead, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to figure out how to push in the opposite direction. And so I did. I just simply threw it out there, said, hey, if anybody wants to have coffee with me, just click the button. And I had somebody show up for have coffee, and I, had my virtual coffee on a Zoom call. That has turned into over 100 episodes now, or nearly 100 episodes recorded. And some of them have been turned into excerpts and thrown online, and some are just between me and the individual who are on that call, and that'll go nowhere. Mm-hmm. And now I've turned it into a live show. It's live. I meet my guest about 8 minutes before we go live, and then we just have a conversation about anything. The only rule is no sales calls.
Wow. Does that, with only the 8 minutes to meet before the show and no scripting, does that make things a little more comfortable or a little bit more awkward, or which would you kind of side with?
I'm going to say it makes things more comfortable. The reason I would say that is because the feedback that I get is, wow, that's so interesting. Wow, this has been such a great conversation. I can't believe I can't believe we discussed. It's those moments when we don't realize that we opened up so much to another individual, which I think it's those moments that make living very unexpectedly profound, right? It's kind of like you're on that plane, and all of a sudden you're just talking to this person next to you. And I'm not one of those people, by the way. I just sit there quietly and I pray to God I don't have to interact with anyone. I put on my noise canceling headphones and I'm like, I am not talking to this person. I am that person. It's really weird to admit that, because when I get somebody on Coffee with Humans, man, I am so good at just talking to people. And I really just want to know, like, hey, who are you and what makes you tick? And how can we share this journey? So I think the raw, unscripted nature leads to better conversations.
That's interesting. And I would have to agree, when I get on planes, I'm that guy that's like, okay, I'm here, put my stuff away, try not to make too much eye contact, stay focused, headphones in, let's take off. So,
right.
and this is, I've had in conversations with other people, and just the nature of interviewing somebody and having a conversation, it seems like you're more conversational than you've ever been in your life. And I'm like, where is that person in regular interaction sometimes? So
right.
I completely understand that. Do you mind sharing some of the recent topics or conversations you covered on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be fun. We've spanned the entire gamut, and I've talked with people from my own hometown in Northern Illinois, and I've talked to people on the other side of the world, as far away as Malaysia, South Africa, the UK, Australia. That might be the furthest. Australia, Kuwait. So we've had conversations that have ranged from like deep, dark secrets where we've just become like close buddies right away, which is really fascinating. It's amazing and special, really, to connect with other people on that level. But then I've talked with people who have dealt with addictions. I've talked with people who've lost jobs, and we've talked through how they could recommunicate who they are as individuals and go, kind of develop that strength again, that they are worth something and they're valuable in the community. And then, especially during COVID, we talked to some people, or I talked with some people who have dealt with some significant fallout from COVID, including losing jobs that they've had for 11 years. And South Africa, I talked with a guy in South Africa who the fallout from COVID, he informed me, was not so much that people were showing up to hospitals to die, but it was because of COVID. They were showing up to hospitals, children with malnutrition, because the economy was broken down. And they weren't receiving $600 a week as an additional check. They were receiving like $20 a month and living 10 to a house. And so now they can't afford to feed their kids. Those types of things, when we're busy arguing about stuff in the States, that we are privileged to be able to have the types of arguments that we have between us. And on the other side of the planet, there are children dying because the economy is broken. That is, I think, just a wake up call. And in between, hey, we're just people, and everybody's got struggles, and all those struggles are as real to us as they are to somebody else.
Wow. It's interesting to be able to get people to, come on, jump on the show and have virtual coffee with you and talk. And I'm pretty sure there's been some of those time differences, so to speak. If you're working with somebody in Australia, Kuwait, and Malaysia, and all the different places, have you noticed? It seems like people are, as you said, they're people wherever we are. It's just what the issues we're dealing with are a little bit differently. Have you noticed that there's a common thread of, have you seen more hope? Have you seen less hope with people in your conversations? Which is, the major feeling or emotion that you've seen with people?
Yeah. So my audience, well, actually not this, my guests, my guests are skewed, right? So my guests are skewed towards people who have access to internet and a camera on a computer. And that necessarily, because they have that stuff, there's a certain aspect of their lives where they're not destitute. So hopelessness or despair or disconnection looks different. It plays out differently. I think for folks who have some of those kind of prerequisites to be able to have the conversation on the other side of the planet. However, that is not to say that the struggles of life don't affect proportionally to the same degree. So for instance, if you've got all of this stuff and you enter into, you enter into a time where you just get addicted to something, you lose all of this stuff. Well, if you had nothing to begin with, or very little, and you lost all that, you still lost your stuff, right? I think also on the other side of that, where we tend to pretend that we are people that we are not, and we want to throw ourselves out there and shine ourselves up so that we will be accepted by our fellow community members on LinkedIn or wherever else. That is also a pretty common theme. And it tends to be the conversations where we just kind of break down that barrier, right? Because all of a sudden it becomes okay. It just becomes okay in this space to just talk with somebody. We're just people. We're just humans. And regardless of our circumstances, again, I go back to this idea that we all have hopes, we all have dreams, we all have fears. And our emotions, if you look at emotion, for instance, emotions are the same all around the planet. Doesn't matter what culture you look in. You can recognize happiness. You can recognize despair. You can recognize fear. You can recognize sadness and anger, and you can recognize confusion. All of those emotions are the exact same. How they play themselves out might have cultural differences, but everybody has those, and those aren't the only things we share. So,
I can imagine some of the conversations and just some of the give and take and how impactful it would be personally for me and how it's changed you and all those things. One of the things you also talked about early on is that you've been an entrepreneur. You've successfully sold, and in some other instances, not so successfully sold businesses. Can you talk about your work with Think Ventures and kind of what you do and how you serve the market?
Yeah. So Thinker was formed as a business consulting company. And the idea was to bring strategy, communications, and technology in-house. And if we could have those things in-house, then we could do a better job of managing communications and technology and strategy in the correct proportion for whatever company would need at the point they would need them. I think that worked for a period of time. It was very difficult to scale. And I actually changed a lot of that work and started outsourcing a lot of those things. Some because of choice and some because of circumstances that have to make decisions on and move through. And so my takeaways through all of those things have been, when I'm in a conversation with somebody or when I'm advising somebody, because now I operate a business, as a business advisor, and sometimes I feel like I'm a life advisor to folks and do a remarkably bad life advising myself for sure. But I think having all of these experiences, seeing all of these organizations, working with different companies, it makes me really good. I've learned to be really good at seeing where people are at and then helping them move through it. So I was just working with a handful of startups yesterday and advising them, listening to what they wanted to do with their kind of lives as it related to their businesses and where their businesses were headed and what they should do. Well, when I've consulted now with hundreds or 1,000 or more startups and small businesses, I've seen a lot. And so now I'm good in that space. And because I talk with people all the time and make it a point to just know people, I'm really good at talking to that person as an individual when it's necessary. And that is just, it's a unique skill set. So my work with Thinker still revolves around business advisory work. It's just shifted into less tactical project type stuff and more into directional advice.
I guess one of the things I'm thinking when you talk about it, it seems like your show, Coffee with Humans, and your work with Thinker, they seem to have this overlap of just being able to connect on the individual level and understanding people and understanding, that emotional side and the people side and how is this going to impact them as a people, not necessarily the organization, but not throwing the organization piece out because it's still impacting them. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. And use it. I use Coffee with Humans as a training ground for myself in some ways. I do absolutely believe that, particularly with Coffee with Humans, when two people share a journey for just an hour, great things can come of that. And in that moment, we have the opportunity to do three things. We can name reality, we can create the things that we want, and we can destroy or take away the things that we no longer want. And that is kind of the essence of any time we as people get together. So now let's take that same thing to, hey, we got 8 people sitting around a boardroom and we've got this grand idea to take over the world with our products and our services and our data. We need to figure out who to talk to. We have the opportunity to figure out what it is we want to do and name it. We have the opportunity to go create anything. We have the opportunity to stop doing or take away the things that we shouldn't be doing. And we need to be able to deal with each other in those circumstances, but we also need to understand who's great at what they're doing and figure out tactically, who should be involved. And then we need to be able to go have conversations with a complete stranger and get them to talk to us about a thing they didn't wake up that day wanting to discuss. And we want to say, hey, I really need you to talk to me because I think this is going to revolutionize your lives and mine. That's all of that kind of works together to, for me at least, how can I know more about more things? I've learned a lot about a lot of different businesses personally, and now, talking with people all around the world. I know a lot about a lot of different countries, and I have thousands of connections. When somebody, in fact, this happened the other day in an advisory scenario. I was working with a client of mine, and they're like, I can't get the right contact at that company. And I was like, type. I have it. And I just shot a message to a person that I was connected with. I said, hey, I need a favor. Who do they talk to? And that afternoon they were hooked up with the person that my client needed to talk to. And that's not why I have those connections. I have those connections because I love people. Mm-hmm. But boy, when you need to get something done, like I can get some stuff done,
Right. Wow. That's really interesting. Now, we've talked a lot about different business pieces and different endeavors you've done up until this point. And in doing my research on you, I found that you previously you were studying theater, choir, and music, and then you went into computer engineering, and now you're kind of, I'll say, an entrepreneur and all of that. How does theater, choir, and music, computer engineering lead to an entrepreneur?
Oh, man, God. You dug too far.
And the other thing is I saw your keyboard back there, and I was like, he's got his keyboard. So this may be a little fun for us.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm a total music geek. I've done music my entire life. And in fact, if you would rank my skill sets, whatever I can do with Coffee with Humans is just slightly under what I can do with singing. So I'm a really great singer. I'm really good with this Coffee with Humans and sometimes really good with advisory services. I used to be a really fantastic programmer in my own right. I would get stuff done quickly and then somebody had to come and clean it all up. And because I just could not bring myself. I was the guy who would go out to my staff at the time and be like, hey, I got this new feature, but don't press this button because it's going to break, just so you know. And I just don't care enough to write all the code to make sure that you don't press that button. So just don't do it. And then, I mean, that's not any kind of software that you'd want to use long term. So somebody would have to come in and clean it all up. But I was really great with the ideas. I think I'm really good creator. Mm-hmm. And I got a computer at a young age. I love the idea that in a computer you can create anything that you want. You can just take it and just mold it. And for me, this is really insightful. I never thought about this before, so I'm glad you asked this question. What was so helpful about programming is that computers just do what you tell them to do and people don't. Mm-hmm. And so I was really good with computers and programming because I could just make it work. Mm-hmm. And people are wild cards, and I don't even know that I'm still very good at managing people. I think I'm pretty bad. I don't know. But I think that's why I got into computers. It was just such creative energy to just make stuff. And then music, I love music. It's my left brain, right brain thing. Like my emotionally jam out and emotionally lit up by music.
Wow. And I asked because my dad, actually, he was a electronics engineer, and he has 3 different degrees, and he's a very intelligent man, but he was very musical as well. But he kind of left the music side when he was a kid. So to see some, people go down that road, it always intrigues me, because I always wondered, it was like, I always separated the two, because the music I always thought was very creative and free form to some extent. And, engineering of any type was very structured, but I've come to learn that no, music is very structured when you understand some of the details of it. So it's just one of those things that I picked up on. So I thought it'd be interesting to hear how you kind of bridge the gap yourself.
Yeah. And electronics are very creative as well. It's very structured in how you need to implement, but it's very creative in in what you can do and why it might be beneficial in the world. So there's creativity, and I didn't understand it when I was younger either. And somebody had to tell me this idea of like, no, there's creativity across across programming. You're super creative. And what I didn't understand, and why I have my keyboard out all the times now, is music is my emotional outlet. And when I don't have a method to get that out, I become toxic to myself. And I need to sometimes just get it out. And so I can plunk it down on the keyboard. I can jam it out. I go sing karaoke. Like I need that, right? That doesn't pay the bills for sure.
Right.
But, I never asked it to. Instead, I made connections like that too. I made some fantastic consulting connections because I took them out for karaoke, and all of a sudden we're singing. And then they're like, "You're going to work for us," and I was like, "Maybe, I don't know, but hey, let's sing." That's the human element, though, right?
Right.
We're just people.
Oh no, it's so. Sometimes it's so out there that it's like, yeah, that's exactly how you don't realize. It's like, yeah, we're just people. We're singing a song, we're whatever it is, we're doing life together. And it's like, hey, you know what? I think we would actually work well together because of this common thing or whatever it is. And
yeah,
it's great how life kind of comes back to very simplistic and very basic connections of, okay, well, hey, you like music, I like music, or if I did karaoke, it'd be making myself look silly, but you may be based on your singing experience, you probably do it a whole lot better than I do. The other thing I wanted to talk about and just get your thoughts is you're a member of the John Maxwell team. How did you get connected with the John Maxwell team?
I want to say that it came up in an ad at some point in time, probably on Facebook. I'm going to say Facebook. And I don't know, it might have been 5 years ago or something like that. I had followed John Maxwell from when I was an early professional, right? So that was probably 2000, 2001, something like that. I had subscribed to his CD series at the time. And I would get every month a CD mailed to me with some things I had to fill in and stuff. Maximum Impact Club, that's what he called it. It was so good. It was so impactful. I really appreciated the lessons in all of that. It was clear, concise. When this came back around, I thought, you know what? I feel a little stagnant in my own growth. Maybe I should pursue that. And it was affordable. It was a trip to Florida. It was meeting new people. And I thought, I'll just add this to my repertoire. And so I did. I added the JMT stuff to my repertoire. I used it a little bit in terms of some groups, some mastermind groups, and then have just kind of plug and played the principles here and there. And it's one of those things where it's kind of like a fraternity where, whenever I'm like, hey, I was part of JMT, they're like, oh my gosh, we are friends forever. It's one of those groups, those binders,
yes.
that you were not in the club, and all of a sudden, like, boom, you're in the club.
Yes.
So it's been really good for that.
I understand. With that, have you, you talked about the different things that you saw yourself hit a plateau, and you were able to apply some things to change and grow. Are there any specific areas that you saw that change and growth resulting in your membership with JMT?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think my focus on clear communication, I think that began to develop a little more. And I don't know if that was JMT or if it was just my life at the time, but I think my focus on clear communication started to develop, I think, around that time frame.
That's interesting, because I know communication it seems like you've been communicating a while. You're very articulate and thoughtful in all of your responses. So, I don't discredit it, but I think there's a combination of different things there, especially with your different experiences and understanding. If you've had to be in theater, I'm thinking you had to learn how to connect with an audience as well at some point in time.
I'm very good at connecting with an audience. I can do performance art. I think what JMT did is it heightened my awareness of the need, not only the need for that, but also the benefits of that in a professional setting. Mm-hmm. Right. When you go to a group of, I don't know, 1,000 people or whatever were in the room when I was there, and you have to give a couple minute or 2 minute or whatever it was intro around a table. When I hear people stumbling all over themselves because they can't put a thought together, I go, oh, I don't want to be that person. Right. Because you may have something great that I need to know about, but your inability to communicate is causing us to not make a connection. Whereas I think, well, if I could do that better, if I have something to say, wouldn't it be good of me to figure out how to communicate that the best way I could? And I don't want to go overboard on that. I think there's certainly opportunity for, spontaneous, meaningless, or, words that aren't put together properly discussions just like that. But I think some critical things like elements of what do you say? Never tell a story without making a point. Never make a point without telling a story. I've used that over and over and over to profound effect. It's those little tweaks that when you can put those in action in a community of other people who believe the same thing, I think it just levels you up.
Wow, that's great, and being able to be able to take that and apply that to yourself and into your life, and not just in a robotic type of fashion, but it becoming a part of who you are in your communication style. So,
yeah, I talked to John. I didn't talk to John. I saw John Maxwell today on some sort of video thing, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a master at it. So he was like, I was at McDonald's having McDonald's fries. Let me tell you something about McDonald's fries. It's like, that was so scripted. He knows where he's headed, but it's the confluence of the scriptedness and the ability to pull it off in just a really organic way that you're captivated. You're like, oh my God, like we're sitting around a fire like that. That's telling us about McDonald's fries.
Yes.
Yes. And it's the art of it, which fascinates me because it separates people who can lead on a massive scale from people who can't. Mm-hmm. I think it's that ability to communicate. That's one of the ways to do it. And take all of the things that here's another thing that you said, evaluated experience is the best teacher.
Yes. Right.
Instead of this idea that experience is the best teacher. It's not true. A lot of experienced people have never changed. Clearly, experience isn't the issue. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. So if you get in that loop of have the experience, evaluate it, figure out what the takeaways are, and then communicate those clearly to somebody else first through your own lens, I think that is a recipe for accelerated development. That's what JMT was for me.
Wow. That's That's profound. And like you, I've been a John Maxwell fan, John Maxwell or Maximum Impact Club subscriber and the like. So, and one of the things that you were talking about stories and John telling stories, he's told a lot of the same stories multiple times and you know them yourself, but you still laugh or you still get, your heartstrings are tugged and you're like, my goodness, he does every single time you hear it. And it's like, that goes to that point of what you were talking about of being able to take it and, being masterful at that skill and being able to apply it. Now,
he figured out how to make it work.
Yes.
And I always, prior to JMT, I would look at the situations like that and I would think, well, that's being disingenuous to be able to, to just kind of rinse and repeat that. It's like, why? If that process works, I developed that process with my consulting. I would sit people around a table and I'd listen to them and I would get to the point where it's like, okay, I'd ask questions and understand exactly what we're doing. And then all of a sudden I would be like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm a pretty visual guy. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to use the whiteboard for just a second, or I'm going to lose track of what we're talking about. And all of a sudden it makes me like super duper human and opens up the opportunities like, oh, he's just going to write stuff on the board. Why? Let's take a look. Right. And then I start saying, well, here's what I think we're at. Right. And I would just like draw things and it let me now break down barriers. I use those lines over and over and over and over. They work for me. I know how to deliver them and I deliver them like a script. I know exactly what I'm going to say to the point where I would go to some sales meetings and I would talk to, this sounds terrible, but I remember I was driving a sales meeting at one point in time and there was a guy in the back seat who had never been on a meeting with me before. Mm-hmm. And I said, here's the thing. I know exactly what I'm doing and I need you to be quiet. I said, when I ask for your help, I'll want your help. And when I don't, I need you to be quiet. And there's this guy sitting next to me who had been on lots of calls with me before. And he was like, yep, absolutely. That's totally true. You person in the back seat, just be quiet. He knows what he's doing. And I said, even when I'm silent for a reason. And I need you to be quiet. and I said, if I get stuck, here's exactly what I'll say. And here's how I'm going to say it too. And I told that guy exactly what was up. And he didn't listen. And he in the middle of the conversation just needed to say something during a moment of silence, which the silence was just what it was, the silence I wanted at the time I wanted it, and I feel like John knows how to deliver those things. He says he knows when the audience is going to laugh. He knows when the audience is going to cry. And it's not being disingenuous. It's being manipulative for a good reason to be able to get an important message across to otherwise resistant people. Mm-hmm. And if I count all the times I was resistant to a very important message in my life, right, I'd be rich. I am naturally resistant. And so if you need to get an important message to cross to me, you better be really skilled at it. And if other people are like me, well, I owe it to the world, to me, to them, to be skilled at it. That I think is, if there's a legacy from John, that is a major, major portion of his legacy that many people are just nowhere near.
It's interesting to how you were talking with as you were going to that sales meeting and having that type of conversation and knowing and being able to talk with somebody and say, okay, here's the way it's going to go. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to be silent and I'm going to need you to understand, hey, this pause is purposeful. It's not to be filled with extraneous chatter. And then to have them kind of, I'll say, interrupt the moment, so to speak. How did you deal with that? I'm pretty sure that was a little bit frustrating just based on my thinking about it. Just how did you kind of handle that interaction afterwards? Because, you made mention of evaluated experience. How did you deal with that and be able to evaluate that experience for yourself?
Well, so I go a couple things. Number one is, yes, I was frustrated, and I was visibly frustrated. And while that interjection was going on, which feels to me a lot like you're looking at the stars at night and you're just admiring what's happening, and then somebody's like, "Hey, it's cold out here," and you're like, "What? What are you? Why are you even here?" That's what it feels like to my soul. And so the first thought in me is, don't be a jerk, Jason. Mm-hmm. Just don't be a jerk. It'll all be fine. Why are you so annoyed by this? That's the first thought. And so from an evaluative perspective, I think, how can I not be a jerk when I need to roll this out the next time? That's number one. Because if I'm a jerk, I'm afraid, or was afraid at the time, well, should I, like, what's this person going to do with that information? Are they going to be like, well, I'll never go to sales calls with you again? And the answer for me might have been like, fair enough. Great. but that's not you can't do that.
Right.
You can't do that in all cases. Right. So I didn't want to be a jerk. At the other side of that, though, it's a teachable moment to simply explain, hey, do you see how this played out? Next time, I really need you to trust me. I know exactly what I'm doing. Here's how I got stuck. And do you see how we got out of that? And here's what it's hard to it's like teaching a kid to drive, right? When I was teaching my kid to drive, it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to slow down at the stop sign. And they don't slow down because they've never put their foot on the brake before. And then you're like, no, slow. No. I said slow down. Right? Like, stop shouting at me. We're like, well, I don't want to get in the middle of the intersection. Yeah. And neither do you. So I think it's offering the opportunity to go through those experiences and then say, hey, do you feel the pressure there? I need you to pay attention to that. And for people who can pay attention to those nuances, they can be very successful in those situations. Some people have no ability to manage those nuances. So stop asking them to. Go do something else with your life. Don't put them in that situation again. They're frustrated, you're frustrated, and you don't get good results.
Very interesting, and just a practical real life situation, just dealing with those types of things. It's a great example. Thank you for going into more further detail with that. Now, on a side note, since we talked about your music and all of your musical background and your karaoke, what's your favorite karaoke song to sing?
Oh man, call me out. This is good. Well, one of my go-tos is Jason Mraz's Butterfly, which I don't know if you know that song.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
It's a really good song. I actually have the ability to pipe it all into this thing, but I'm not going to, because then you'll have a copyright problem. Oh, yeah. But Jason Mraz's Butterfly, it's syncopated, it's jazzy, it's high, it's smooth. It's like a dance. Mm-hmm. It's musically, it's just a dance. It's like, yeah, you can just like move all around that. Okay. And it's a sexually suggestive song, so it's good with the ladies.
Okay. Wow. What door did I open up there?
You asked.
Yes, I did. Well, again, I want to say thank you again, Jason, for taking the time out and sharing just a little bit about yourself and kind of some of the things that you've been working on. And I think you've got quite a few plates spinning in the air, it seems like, with your coffee with humans and just what you're doing for work and being able to consult with people and the like. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and chat with us for this 30, 40 minutes or whatever it's been. I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us on the show this week. Thank you and have a great day. Thank you for watching this week's video. I hope you were able to find one thing you can begin to apply to your life today. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below. Let us know if you know of any great guests to be on the spotlight. I look forward to your questions and comments. Thanks again for watching.